Hey folks, we're back. Just the way things have been, people have asked, I forgot the guy's name, Monkey D. Luff or whatever he messaged, and they wanted to know when you guys doing another show, like what's going on? And it's just the way things have been going, life and anyways. But we're back and we're going to cover more fights. I'm here with Lou Eisen, um, you know, boxing historian, comedian, actor, and he's got a new book coming out. What's the book, Lou? What's it called?
It's boxing's greatest controversies, blunders, blood feuds, and bad decisions. So it
That's
covers fights from 1780 till 10 years ago.
well, that's pretty much the story of my life there. I should get that tattooed on my ass. I mean, um, so what's it mostly about? Just
I picked 25 controversial fights where people were upset about the decision, along with the fighters and the fans. And I looked into it and I said, what really happened here in this fight? This judge was paid off, or the judge wasn't paid off. The judge was incompetent. The fighter lost because he hadn't trained, or he was paid to lose. Or a fighter, for instance, one of the fights I pick is from the 30s, Primo Carnera and Ernie Schaff. Schaff died after their fight. He went down from a light jab in the 13th round. And the writers back then said that Max Baer killed him. Max Baer beat him up. Usually when you die in boxing, it's the fight before it that kills you, the beating you get.
really?
And I looked it up and I thought, yeah, you get a bad beating, you survive. And then in the next fight, a guy just taps you and you're gone. But I thought that can't be true because he fought Max Baer 5 fights before. He couldn't have taken a deathly beating and then had 5 more fights that he won and then fight Primo Carnera. And they knew that. And they said that because Baer had given him a bad beating, but Schaff had won the fight. So, and Baer had killed the fighter before in the ring. So when I looked into it, I actually was able to get the coroner's report, which I sent to my brother Len, who's a doctor. And he said he died of spinal meningitis, which means he would have died whether he'd gone in the ring or not that night. And I said, how did they let him in the ring? And he said, well, back then they wouldn't have known he had it unless they actually opened up his head and did an examination after he died. He said, and also he had a high fever. Instead of going to a hospital, he went to a religious retreat. And because it was controlled by the mob doctor said, you're fine, get in the ring. And he said, I don't feel fine. My head hurts. I feel dizzy. And they went 13 rounds and he just collapsed from a light punch and died 3 days later. Right. Carnera thought he killed him, but Carnera didn't punch hard enough to bust an egg.
When you like, because what you're going like history, how do you know when someone is, I mean, I love watching wrestling shoots when guys talk about what happened 30 years plus, right? And then you listen to another guy that was in the match or in the, in that, part of that, and they give a totally different account.
Right.
And it's like, I love the stories, but I'm like, are these guys, are they forgetting? Like, are they purposely forgetting, or do they want it to kind of be like, make that, their story the right one? I don't get that. So when you are talking, like when you're like trying to you're going back some 80 years to some of these fights, how do you know that it's the that you're getting the truth? Like, how do you?
Because the truth is documented there. I went into the archives of the New York State Athletic Commission, and I also went into the medical archives for deaths that year, and I found Ernie Schaff, and I cross-checked it with the archives from New Jersey, which is where he was from, and I read all the newspaper reports, and I got the coroner's report. And the coroner's report, the doctors don't care. It's not that they don't care; it's that they're not serving anyone other than medicine. So these were doctors not affiliated with anyone except the state of New York, and they were neurosurgeons, and they did the autopsy, and they said he had spinal meningitis. He would have died whether he'd gone in the ring or not. So Carnera didn't kill him. He certainly had a lot of edemas, a lot of blood, bruises on his brain that he got from an accumulation of fights. But they said that wasn't what killed him. And so according to the medical report, you can find out what killed him. In fact, the first fight I cover from 1780, there is relevant newspaper and periodical information from that time about that fight. Just no one bothered to look it up except myself and one of my mentors, Tony G, who wrote a book called Up to Scratch about fights back then. So what Tony did was he took a couple hundred years of fights, bare knuckle fights in Britain and the States, and said everything written about these fights is incorrect because it was written 50, 60, 80 years after from third and fourth hand knowledge. He said there is real knowledge about it. You just have to spend the time to get it. And I did. So a book like my book takes a lot of time. I mentioned to you off air that I'm writing another book on George Dixon. Well, I've spent 12, 13 years investigating that, doing research, getting thousands of newspaper articles and rare photos and medical documents and information, not just from the States and Canada, but from Australia, England, Scotland, any place where he was mentioned. And, I've spent that time trying to track down what happened to his wife after. So it takes a lot of time. When you see a good book.
Would you consider like what you do, like kind of like a detective?
Not really. Well, yeah, in a sense, but I'm trying to grab their hand and pull them into the present. I think they deserve to be known. That's my only function on the planet other than being a father. Because I was, a comedian for a long time, but there's people that were funnier than me, and I'm a writer, but there's people that can write better than me. But my function is I remember. I'm doggedly pursuing things. And when people say to me, well, there can't be any information on this guy, he fought in 1740. And my attitude is, you're wrong. I don't know if the information on him is correct, but I will find it. And I do. And there's one in particular, Gazette that's been around for over 300 years covering boxing in England. And so you can go into back copies online and find what they wrote. What they wrote isn't necessarily the truth back then, but you have to be able to gather different sources. The other thing too is the trap you don't want to fall into is filling it in yourself. So you don't want to say, which is one of the reasons my first chapter is being edited by Tony G, is because I said, well, this guy did this, and that. Fighters that do this often fight like this, and they have this background. And he said to me, that's not true, what you said about him. You're assuming that. In fact, we don't know what his background is, and we don't know how he fought. We only know what was written for that fight. So he said, you can't just assume. You can only put down fact. You can say, in the past, other fighters that fought like him have done this, but we don't know that about him. And you find that a lot. My father always said, there's nothing wrong with admitting you don't know something. So I have that several times in my book where I'll say about the rumors were that this fighter did this, but that's never been proven conclusively. And as a result, we simply don't know.
Yeah. Like I was just thinking of, I used to enjoy watching Larry King when he used to bring in book authors, and then it would be like a controversial book about something, and he would always have somebody else saying, like, that would come on, and say, well, that's not true. And you would see that the guy that wrote the book and the guy, the guy saying it's not true, another historian, you'd have two historians arguing over what happened, 70, 80 years ago. And I always thought that that's fascinating. Uh, but it's just like, you'll sit there and go, like, who do you believe? Because it happened so long ago,
Right,
and
but
I'm
then
not saying you're a book. I'm saying, like, when a person is writing a book about, an example was the Amityville Horror, right? So
but that was proven to be false, and the family admitted it.
but yeah, but then there's the guy that wants to sell the book and sell the story. It was kind of,
Right.
you know what I
Even
mean?
though the family admitted it. This is the same thing that this is one of the dangers of being online. For a long time, people were, I'm not going to mention his name, but there's a comic who went completely nuts and was against all vaccines. Doesn't know anything. He's not a medical doctor, but I know. And basically, that was his attitude.
Like
And he said, that
he went crazy.
he's mentally ill.
Okay.
He's also physically ill, but he's, just, I know more than you do. And at one point I had my kid brother, who's a well-known doctor, on, and he said, you don't know this and you don't know that. And my brother's a genius, I mean, he was the head of Mensa, and I mean, he's brilliant. So um, basically this guy was saying the flu vaccine doesn't work. And my brother said, it does work. The one you're showing is not the one we should use in the hospitals. And he said, and this comic said, well, it has mercury in it. Right. And my brother said, you know how many types of mercury there are? There's just mercury. No, there's 4 types. The one you're mentioning is not harmful, and it was taken out 25 years ago. That's not true. It is true. You're not a doctor. You don't take pharmacology. You don't know. And he said, well, that doctor in Britain did the study, and he said these people got ill from the vaccine. Right. And that doctor is now in prison because he admitted he lied. He manufactured everything. And yet you're still going on about what he said. That's your basis for your argument, even though the doctor himself said, I lied. Everything I said was a lie. It was all made up. But these people won't give in. And so I find that happens. I try to stay off, unless it's someone I know. When it comes to boxing, someone will say, this fighter did this and that and said this. And I'll say, actually, no, he didn't. That's not what he told me. And usually you get, well, who are you? You're just an ignorant whatever. And at that point, you realize you're talking with a child and there's no point. So I tried to stay out of the argument. And as Angela Dundee would tell me, just focus on your writing. People are allowed to be wrong. And that's quite common. For instance, in the third Ali Frazier fight, they said that Boogaloo Watts, who was a great fighter from Philly, who got a gift over Hagler, and then Hagler destroyed him in the rematch. Boogaloo Watts said, I was in Ali's corner, and he said he was quitting just before Eddie Futch stopped the fight and wouldn't let Joe Frazier come out. Well, I spoke to Hugh McIlvanney, British writer, who was less than 3 feet behind Ali and Angela Dundee, and he said to me, I never heard them say that. They never said that. Ali said, I'll go till I drop. But Ali was exhausted. But Ali was up. He was ready to go out for the round.
Right.
And Watts claims that happened, but every time he's been interviewed, he said, I don't know where that story comes from. So it doesn't take anything away from Frazier, who was a magnificent champion and fought his whole career blind in one eye. Frazier had diabetes and high blood pressure and still ended up being the heavyweight champion of the world. And I met him many times and I loved him. And I told him I loved him. He was a wonderful person. His best friend in boxing was Chuvalo, and Chuvalo was he was Chuvalo's best friend. They loved each other. And when they fought, Frazier stopped George in the 3rd round, broke his right orbital bone with a left hook. And after the fight, Frazier's mother attacked Frazier because she said, he's such a nice boy. Why'd you do that to your friend? And Joe was saying, it's not personal, Mom. We love each other. And Joe spent all that time in the hospital in New York with George, because just to say, it's not personal. I love the man. We're brothers. You know, it's not personal. It just happened.
Right.
And so there are a lot of things like that that happen in boxing. People get upset and they write things because they've been told something, but they're not true. You can always find the truth.
Right. I wanted to go back to
Sorry to interrupt.
no.
You know,
Yeah.
in the movie Raging Bull with about Jake LaMotta with Roberto De Niro, and
Yeah.
at the end of film, he walks over to Ray Robinson, "You never knocked me down, Ray." He never said that. Never happened.
Yeah. They're trying to take liberties to make it.
Right. Jake LaMotta told me. I never said that to him.
Right. No, I know, but when it's a movie,
Right, but
Yeah.
everyone you speak to, they bring that up and they think it happened. It never happened.
Yeah. No, yeah. But going back to the fighter that died like when you said it's the last fight person, that's when the
The
damage was
fight
done.
before is when the damage is done.
So he fought 5 more times and then expired in the ring. Like
No, he expired in the hospital. He collapsed in the ring, but he collapsed because of spinal meningitis,
but
not because of injuries from boxing.
not so it wasn't from boxing, but
Right.
when guys do pass inside the ring, and it happens and it sucks. That is it like with the technology they have today, they would know that something is not
Well,
right.
yes and no. Very few fighters actually die in the ring. I only know of one or two in the history of the sport. Not to say more haven't, it's just the ones that I know of. When a fighter dies, a lot of times it's just the one constant I have found in the past 300 years for fighters that have died as a result of ring injuries is too many fights in too short a period of time. And their brain doesn't have time, their body doesn't have time to recover. So you look at a guy like Davey Moore, the Springfield Rifle. There were 2 Davey Moore fighters. One was a junior middleweight years later who was knocked out by Duran. He died a couple of weeks later, but not from ring injuries. His car he was working on backed out over him.
Oh,
Davey Moore, the Springfield Rifle, who was the featherweight champion, fought Angelo Dundee's fighter. And this was a 1.5 year period of time in 62, 63, when 3 fighters died in close proximity in time to each other. So Davey Moore, because featherweights and lightweight fighters got paid next to nothing, fought something like 24, 25 times within 3 years.
oh,
That's
wow.
way too many.
Yeah.
And so he fought Sugar Amos, who was a great fighter, a young fighter, and just kept coming and throwing punches. And he went down, and he first went down, he was leaning out over the ropes, got back up. Next time he went down, his head hit the bottom rope, which snapped his neck. He got up, and the referee stopped the fight. He was giving an interview after the fight on TV. And then in the dressing room, he said, "I feel funny." Funny how? "I have a really bad headache that's throbbing." And he said, "Do you want a rematch with Ramus?" "Well, and he said, and then he was gone. He collapsed on the floor, and that was it. And what happened was they didn't have 4 ring ropes then. They only had 3. And so, especially when you're a smaller fighter, the ropes will catch you. But this time he fell all the way down to the bottom rope. The ropes weren't padded. It was just steel cables. Hit his neck, snapped his neck. So I asked my brother, why did he take that long to die? And he said, it's like the actress Natasha Richardson. It depends how long it takes your brain to swell. And his brain started to swell. And by the time he got to the dressing room, it was swollen too much. And there was nowhere for it to go. And he died.
Yeah.
And that's one of the deaths in the book. The other one I wrote about was a well-known one. Benny Kid Paret died after fighting his 3rd match with Emil Griffith, but there's a lot more that went on. Griffith was the welterweight champ. Pret beat him. Griffith, Pret had it. Griffith beat him. Pret won it in the second match. And then this was the third match, the rubber match. Underlying all this, and they were friends, Pret was from Cuba, was that fact that Griffith was gay. And it wasn't mentioned back then.
I'm
You
sorry.
just didn't.
I didn't.
Griffith was a homosexual, Emil Griffith.
What year was this?
62. But you didn't mention it in the press.
Right.
You just didn't. It's the same as the press knew Kennedy was having sex in the White House and sex on beaches all over the country, but they didn't mention it because you just didn't do that. So when people said to Kennedy, we're going to sell this to the press unless he pays $1 million, just said, fine, sell it to them, because he knew they weren't going to publish it. And so what happened is, in this fight, before the second fight at the weigh-in, he called him, called Griffith a maricon, which is Spanish for faggot. And the press that was there was stunned because it was known that Griffith was gay, but you just didn't talk about it. And Griffith got really angry. And so that was a brutal fight, but Pret won the fight. Griffith was ahead, but he took his foot off the gas pedal. And he sort of, sometimes you lose your focus. The third fight at the weigh-in, they did it, but worse than calling him a medicon, he went in when Griffith was on the scales on his underwear, and he grabbed his ass and he simulated sodomizing him. And Griffith turned around and said, tonight you're gonna die. Tonight you're gonna pay for that with your life. And he was beyond angry. But the problem was, first of all, his trainer, Gil Clancy, grabbed him and said, no, we don't fight for free. We fight for money. And he didn't really mean he was going to kill him. He just, like you say it to kids, I'm going to kill you if you break that glass again. So he said it out of anger. He didn't mean it because they had been friends. He didn't know why Pret was doing this. But worse than that was Pret's own team was joining in and laughing. And before the third fight that they had, Pret had challenged the Sherman tank known as Gene Fulmer for the middleweight title. And Fulmer gave him the beating of a lifetime. He dropped him like 6 times, knocked him out in the 10th round. And Fulmer said to me at the Hall of Fame in Canastota, New York, he said, Lou, I hit him shots. I never butchered a man like I did him. And I took a year off. He was back 3 months later. And it wasn't my fault that he died. And Angelo Dundee, my surrogate father, went to Pret's trainer, Manuel Alfaro's manager, and said, he shouldn't be fighting. He's a shot fighter. And he said, he's only 24. Right, but he's got nothing left. You used everything he's got. He's fighting on fumes now. If he fights again, he'll die. And his manager said, if he dies, I'll go to Cuba and get another one. And so Pret gets in the ring. He drops Griffith in the 6th round. Griffith goes back to his corner. Gil Clancy slaps him in the face and says, hey, do you want to win? Do you want to get your title back? If not, I'll stop it now if you're not going to be interested. He said, you corner him, you let your hands go, and you don't stop until the ref steps in. And so he turned it on, and then he just kept hitting him and hitting him and hitting him. And in the 13th round, he got him in the corner. He landed like something like 27 to 30 unanswered punches to the head. After the first 4 or 5, you can see Pret's out, like his hands drop, and he's caught on the ropes, and he's slowly sliding down. But the referee, who was a great referee, Ruby Goldstein, froze. He said he was standing there, and he's trying to move, but his body wouldn't let him. And Pret sunk to the ground, carried out in a stretcher. And this is typical of boxing fans. People were throwing cups of warm urine at him.
What?
Because they thought this happened when Duck Koo Kim died. Because they thought
they were throwing cups of pee.
Yeah, because they thought he's faking it.
Right.
Same thing when Ernie Shaft died. Fans just couldn't accept that attack like that. Fans can't accept that when the bell rings, one shot can end a man's life. They just won't accept it. And so Pret's being carried out of the ring, goes to the hospital. He dies 3 or 4 days later. And of course, when they went to the dressing room, his money was gone. Been promised 50 grand. His manager, it was believed that his manager took his money. The family never saw it. And, you know, when they spoke to his wife, they said, why did he fight again? And she said, well, he was illiterate. What was he going to do? He couldn't read or write in Spanish or English, excuse me. And there was, what else? What other job would he do other than boxing?
Right.
Right? He had to box. So if he had survived this, she said there's no telling that he would have actually quit the ring. Sadly, the decision was made for him. So it's just one of those things where, you know, it was a sad time, you know, and then you had Davey Moore die, him, and then Alejandro Lavarante from Argentina, who was a heavyweight, who Ali had knocked out and several other guys had knocked out. And he just fought, this guy had fought too many times, too many knockouts, and eventually it was too much. Lavarante was in a coma for like 3 years and then passed away. Yeah. People wanted to ban boxing, but this isn't, people will say to you, I had one manager promoter say to me, and it was ridiculous. Well, you know, but out of 10,000 fights a year, if 1 or 2 guys die, that's not a lot. It is to their family. It's still too many. And some of these are preventable. The problem is referees often won't say, that's it, it's over, because they can physically get attacked. And so a friend of mine who was junior welterweight world champion, Buddy McGirt, he trains guys, and he had a guy, a Russian, Maxim Dadashev, who died from injuries sustained in the ring a couple of years ago. And ever since, and the guy kept saying, no, I'm fine, buddy, I can go out, I'm fine, I'm not hurt. He was winning the fight, but he was taking a good beating. And guys now, like Buddy McGirt, will say, nah, that's too much. And their fighter will get angry, and Buddy or another trainer will say, you took 8 shots in a row to the head. It's over. You didn't return a punch. That's too much. It's done. And this happened on the weekend. A friend of mine who's one of the great trainers, Roberto Garcia, was also a world champion. He had a fighter with an unbeaten record, and he was fighting a southpaw, and his fighter was getting steadily beaten to the punch. And I think around the 8th round, the referee stopped it, and the corner had no problem. And the fighter was like, I'm fine. And as Roberto said, he got you against the ropes. He landed 12 consecutive punches to your chin. You're done. You didn't fight back. If you were fine, you wouldn't be getting hit that often. It's over. And there's nothing wrong with that. You did your best. And that's what fans, a lot of fans like to see a guy get carried out. Or they like to see a guy like Arturo Gatti, who stages the tremendous comeback. But guys like that have short shelf lives in boxing because it takes such a toll on their brain. They don't last long.
Yeah, I saw a video of Mike Tyson's style, the peekaboo style.
Yeah.
That style is so hard to maintain that it's a who was it that it was a great video.
Yeah, Floyd Patterson used it, and it was designed by Customato.
Yeah, because Customato saw a guy that had like over 300 fights. He wasn't a great fighter, but he liked his style, and he said, you know what, that style could really do really well. So Customato saw, I forget the fighter's name, but
well,
this guy,
Archie Moore used armadillo defense, but it wasn't peekaboo. But he had over 300 fights and one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, like this guy had incredible, like just. Anyways, it was where he taught Tyson, and what the hell's his name?
Jose Torres.
No,
Jose Torres was another Customato fighter.
I'm thinking of the video I saw him explain. I can't believe I forgot the man's name. He was Tyson's, one of Tyson's early trainers. He does his own boxing show. What the hell's his name?
Eddie Atlas.
Yes. So Atlas was explaining how that's done and how Customato saw this this fighter earlier on when he was a young man. And Casamano never got married because he just said it wouldn't be fair to whoever I
Yeah,
marry.
Castellano had a girlfriend for several girlfriends for long periods of time.
Yeah, but he didn't have any children or anything. He didn't have a.
Not that we know of.
Yeah, so but that's how.
A lot of guys in boxing are like that. They're rogues.
Yeah, I know a lot of people like that too. That just
The great Charlie Goldman, who was one of the all-time great trainers, always would introduce his girlfriend as his cousin, and people would say, "Man, you got a lot of pretty cousins." But they kept their private life private.
Right. Well, back then it was we don't have like social media today where you could find out what if the guy's got a pimple on his ass. I mean, today you could, they could, if anybody wants to find anything about you, they go after you. It's not like before, you know. I mean, you could hide things, For the longest time, remember, everybody assumed that Freddie Mercury was gay, but the papers never covered it. Nobody really talked.
No, but I mean, it's same with Rock Hudson. But when you look at a Life magazine from 1960, there's a picture of all these stars from 1960, these women wearing bathing suits from the 20s, and one of them was dressed up like a woman as Rock Hudson. I remember asking my dad once, and he said, "Yeah, everyone knew he was gay. They just didn't mention it." In
Right.
fact, the great writer Pete Hamill told me one time that he wrote about Emil Griffith, and he said that Perret upset him by calling him American. He called him a faggot in Spanish. He claimed that Griffith was a homosexual. And he said, my editor changed it to, he called Griffith an unman. And I said, what happened? And he said, I had to be held back from beating the hell out of my editor. And I said, really? He goes, what's an unman? He said, a toaster oven is an unman. There's no such word as unman.
Right.
To say he was gay, why can't you say that? But he was just furious that they wouldn't print that.
Yeah.
So,
different time. All
yeah.
right. So so the Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder fight was scheduled for July 24th, and it's been postponed because of what is it, 10 people? Would you say 10 people?
And Fury have COVID-19.
Right.
You have to understand, when you get down to the southern states or western states, a lot of them don't believe in it. They don't wear masks. They don't do social distancing. And these are macho guys, and they don't believe it'll happen to them. Teofimo Lopez got it. He's still in the hospital, and Tyson Fury has it now. So the fight's been delayed till late December.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they didn't get wouldn't he have gotten his 2 needles and stuff?
He said he had his shots. I don't know if he had 1 or 2, but who knows? I don't know if he did or not. The one thing that concerned me before this was when I spoke with Lennox Lewis. Lennox had said that Fury was coming in 30 pounds heavier for the third match with Wilder. Well, in his second match, Fury's 6'9", he weighed 267. To come in at 297 tells me that he wasn't disciplined or focused. That's just too heavy,
Yeah,
Now,
I thought he was. I thought the last fight he was 273 pounds.
something like that, yeah.
Yeah, but he was using it, Lou, to he was exhausting Wilder.
Right, because he outweighed Wilder by a good 40 pounds.
Well, he would lean up against them, and
much bigger man. But I don't think you can be that mobile, that heavy. But who knows?
Well, when he I saw a picture of those, of both of them, and he just does not have the physique of compared to when you picture a heavyweight champion.
Right.
He just does not have that, muscles. He's got it looks like he's got a tire around his.
Yeah, he does, but he doesn't. Not any. Before him, there were no 6'9" world heavyweight champions. So he doesn't have the body to have that kind of physique. But you're right, he doesn't. And we'll see what happens in December if he's able to. I mean, if I were his trainer, I would say, 260 is the limit.
Yeah, why
265.
would he want a balloon? Like he on the press conference, he was saying, I'm gonna be 300 pounds when I get in there.
I don't know why. He thinks maybe it gives him added strength. Don't know.
I don't know. It's just weird. But speaking of weird, did
I
you
think
see the press conference?
I caught part of it.
Yeah, Wilder didn't say a word. He had somebody else speak for him, like a trainer. But the trainer, I guess he sparred with Fury, and that's it. And Fury just said, "Listen, why would he listen to you? You haven't won anything."
Right. He
So
had a really good trainer, Mark Breland. He blamed Mark Breland for his last fight. Wilder's one of those guys. I don't have much respect for Wilder. He's one of those guys that he didn't really fight anyone of consequence in the way up. He beat Luis Ortiz twice, but Luis Ortiz is nearly 50. He is a guy that if you knock him out cold, he won't. He just no, I didn't lose. Referee counted too quick. No, but you're unconscious. Doesn't matter. He will not accept defeat with grace. Ali did, but Wilder didn't.
yeah, it's
Wilder
very,
can't.
very,
Wilder
very,
couldn't be taught anything new. He telegraphs his punches like a lot of tall men. He doesn't have good balance. He's looking only to land the right hand. Changing from trainer to trainer to trainer is not going to make a difference if the skill and the ability to learn aren't there, which they are not with Wilder.
don't you think they're relying too much on Wilder's anytime? See, when people go, who do you pick for the fight? I say Fury, but in boxing, especially just one punch could change everything. And
Right, but Wilder telegraphs his punches. Fury can see them coming.
when you say telegraph, can you explain?
He pulls his hand back, or he gives you a tell sign. When
So
you
if I,
punch, when
so
you
if I'm
punch, you punch
right,
from the shoulder and you twist at the hip. He pulls his hand back, so you know what he's going to do.
oh, so when
see it
he's
coming.
when he's ready to unload, he puts it right back,
Yeah,
and that's when you're like, okay, it's time for me to get out of the way,
yeah,
right? And when you're
yeah.
6'9", how tall is Wilder? Wilder, what is he, 6'6"?
6'7". The
Six
thing
seven.
is,
He's a big boy too, man.
yeah, but Fury knew enough to move side to side. You don't duck when you're 6'9" because you don't give away your height advantage. It doesn't make sense because you'll duck into an uppercut. When Lennox Lewis, who's 6'5", fought Michael Grant was 6'8". Grant had only been boxing for 3 years. I don't know why people thought Grant had a chance. But Lennox threw a jab and Grant ducked under it. And then Lewis thought, why is he doing that? You're not supposed to do that. He doesn't know what he's doing. So next time he faked a jab, and when Grant ducked, he hit him with a right uppercut, and that was it. Fight was over. So these guys, David Price is a British heavyweight. He's 6'9", and terrible balance. Fury's got better balance, but in the first fight with Wilder dropped him twice, but Fury got up.
And that's to me where most guys, I mean, if you watch the Fury fights, when he drops guys, they stay down. So when I saw that fight and I saw Fury get up, I first I thought it was over. Then him getting up, I just thought, okay, this is really interesting. And
That's what makes him a champion.
then he gets dropped again, and he gets up.
Yeah.
And they say, that's when Fury figured out that this guy cannot fight backwards.
Right. Very few fighters can.
When
if you've got, only in the history of the sport, only 2 or 3 have ever been able to fight backwards.
So when they say you cannot fight backwards, so if if you mean you cannot, like, what's the problem about fighting backwards, about going?
Well, you look at a guy like Joe Frazier, and Tyson, their skill set is coming forward at a quick speed. This relates to all sports. The key to all sports is having your feet moving at all time. When you look at the Italy game on the weekend with England, in the beginning, first part of the game, England was winning because they were taking the game to Italy. They were rushing each Italian player, forcing them to make plays quicker than they wanted to. And then England just stopped and they let Italy come to them. And that's when it backfired. When in boxing, you get a guy like Ali who can fight going backwards, it's difficult because a guy who can go forwards really well is not going to have that much of an advantage over him. But when you get a guy like Frazier who can only fight going forward, or Tyson, and then you get a Foreman in against a Frazier, and Foreman's the bigger man, he's going to push Frazier back, and it's just not something he can't get his balance, he can't get his stance right, and put his feet firmly down on the ground long enough to get good shots off. Same when Buster Douglas fought Tyson, he had Tyson on his heels. Tyson needs to go forward to get the leverage. Once you move him back, he's not sure what to do. And he doesn't have the body shape to do it. So it's difficult fighting back. It's easier when you're going forward throwing punches.
Yeah, and do you think mentally, like, I don't know, the way Wilder has been acting, like when he lost, like, I get it, everybody gets down, or
Wilder's never lost as a pro.
but
Or excuse me, Fury's never lost. Wilder has, yes.
yeah. So with Wilder, I mean, I've seen where most guys the night of the loss will sit there and say, no, something, this is bull crap, or I don't, I'm gonna get, it was the referee or whatever, they will go with every excuse. But then after 24 hours, they just sit there and go, you know what, the better man won. Like, they think about what happened, and they're like, yeah, I look really bad, I look like a sore loser. Where Wilder, it just seems like he just does not, his mind is set that his suit was too heavy that night. His water was spiked, his team was against him. Fury's gloves were there was something in his gloves. There was, I mean, there was, like, it was a full moon, you
It's
name it.
complete BS.
Yeah, but but most guys come to the realization that I lost fair and square.
Right. But it took George Foreman 20 years to accept the fact that Ali beat him, because Foreman had never lost in the amateurs or the pros, and Foreman had won every fight in devastating fashion. So the fact that Ali stood up to him and beat him, George told me, I was reaching for excuses everywhere. I lost because there's 7 days in a week. I lost, somebody spiked the water. The canvas was too soft. Frank Sinatra floated above the ring and got my attention. I mean, he said I had a million excuses. He said it took 20 years for me to wake up in bed and say to my wife, you know what? He beat me, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And
but most fighters, 99% of them just sit there, and go, you know what? I lost, and I'm going to get him. I'll get him next time. That's the way.
Yeah, but Wilder won't do it. Fighters are, as Norman Mailer said, are at their core the best of all liars, and they lie more to themselves than anyone else. And Wilder's just lying to himself. It's purely ego. He won't accept the fact that he got stopped. He got dropped twice. He was getting the hell pounded out of him, and he knew it. And the sad thing is, if the referee doesn't stop the fight, then Fury knocks him out 30 seconds later. I said this to Lennox Lewis when I was working for him. I said, when you beat Vitaly Klitschko and he had that horrible cut, and you were beating the hell out of him, people said, well, he beat him because of the cut. And my answer was, oh, I forgot. If it's a Canadian fighter and the other guy gets a cut, it doesn't count. Canadian fighters can't win that way. They always have to knock a guy out. I said, why do the rules change if it's a Canadian fighter? And I said, what upset me, and Lennox said, I wasn't upset, I won. I said, I know, but what upset me, Lennox, was given 10 more seconds in that round, you would have knocked him out. And he said, Lou, give him 10 more seconds, he would have left the arena in a pine box. So fighters won't accept it. Klitschko said, I want a rematch, I want a rematch. And Lennox said, you will get a rematch when you come out and admit that I defeated you. And people say, yeah, but you know what? Klitschko was winning the first part of the fight. Yeah, but so what? This baseball team was ahead 4-0 and lost 10-4. Baseball games aren't 3 innings. Fights aren't, go the distance. It's who wins them when the fight's over, not when the fight's in the middle of it. I've seen guys, we've all seen guys take a beating for 11 rounds and then win by a knockout in the 12th. It happens. He beat him. It counts. But Klitschko wouldn't accept it. He finally did, and they became friends. But it's not easy to accept a defeat like that. And it wasn't from a headbutt. He got cut from a punch. And fighters have to have that mindset that they can't be beat. And when you look at the wonderful clips of the young Ali before he fought Liston the first time, I can't be beat. You talk yourself into it. I can't be beat. I was born the champ. It's not possible. I've never lost. When's the last time I lost a fight? Ever. I can't be beat. And you talk yourself into that. So you have to have that mindset if you're going to compete in the ring, and I always tell people when they're a bit down and depressed, listen to the young Ali talk. It'll cheer you up. And a lot of fighters are like that. Recently, there was a fight where Oscar Valdez beat Miguel Berchelt. Berchelt was a great, I think, junior lightweight champion and hadn't lost in 12 fights. And no one thought he could be beat, but Valdez beat him and knocked him out. Both men said it's not possible for us to be beaten. Berchelt had never lost. Neither had Valdez. One was going to lose. And it happened to be Berchelt. Berchelt fought his typical fight, and Valdez boxed him instead of slugged with him and let him punch himself out and, leap at him with his chin out, and he paid for it.
Yeah. When these two face off, when Wilder and Fury do eventually go at it, what do you think's going to happen?
It's hard to say. I think Fury will beat him because Wilder still hasn't accepted that defeat, and that's going to be playing on his mind. But it also depends quite a bit on their physical condition. And what's happening right now, as you and I are talking, is eerily similar to the second Ali Liston fight. Liston was ready. No one had seen him in that good shape in 10 years. He was getting ready. And in fact, Liston was favored in the rematch over Ali. They were going to fight in Boston, at the Boston Garden. 2 days before the fight, Ali's sitting in his hotel room, grabs his side, starts throwing up blood. He had a terrible hernia. And if he hadn't got to the hospital, he could have died. It was a long operation. And the doctor said he's out for 6 months. Liston went to his hotel room and cried because Liston, who loved the drink, loved the smoke, and loved to gorge himself on junk food, had forsworn all of that for 4 months and gotten himself in shape. Best shape ever. And now they're saying to him, you got to do it for 6 more months.
Oh,
I can't. And especially because he was close to 40. He couldn't do it for 6 more months to wait for Ali because he didn't think he was going to get a shot at Al. He said, they're going to do this, and then they're going to just say, fine, we'll go fight someone else. So finally, the fight comes. They have it in Lewiston, Maine. And Jerry Eisenberg has got a book out on the great heavyweight eras of the 70s. Just a magnificent writer. He's been around for 60 years. Just a wonderful, wonderful person. for the Newark Star Ledger. He said to me, he said, Lou, I was at Liston's camp the weekend before the rematch with Ali, and Liston was missing the heavy bag and falling, and he couldn't get a rhythm on the speed bag, and his sparring partners are beating him up easily. And I looked at another writer and I said, this guy's going to challenge Ali for the title. He can't even get his balance right. He's falling. And Liston had given up. He didn't care. He didn't train.
Right.
He said, they're not going to give it to me anyways. Liston thought up until the second fight happened that they're going to take it away. They're going to do it to him again. So he said, why would I bother doing this, keeping this shape when they're going to screw me again?
Right.
And that's sort of, could happen here with Wilder.
Like,
Wilder.
do you think that Fury, like, he's never had a great physique, but do you think that he's just like, he's very like, you have to be confident as a fighter, you have to be,
right? But Fury, when he dropped out of boxing for a while, he weighed over 400 pounds. Do you think he's being
too overconfident? Like,
that can happen. I don't think he wants to give Wilder that chance. I don't think he's. I think he's extremely confident. A lot of it's show, and a lot of it's just to buck himself up. But when he dropped out of boxing, he was over 400 pounds because he has mental illness. He literally does have mental illness, and brave of him to come out and talk about it. But at 273, he's pushing it. He could handle that because he's 6'9", but he's still, to come in at 300 would be too much, I think. But we don't know. I think it would be. But you have, Canelo Alvarez started boxing like professionally. He got in as a junior middle at 154. And he's fought for the light heavyweight title at 175. And that's a big jump. And his body didn't look that much different. Nikolai Valuev, who was really more of a freak, was 7 feet 4 inches. He held one title for a short time. And he weighed 350 pounds when he fought Evander Holyfield, but he was 7'4". So he was a pituitary gland case. Right. But I think that Wilder, I think more weight shows less focus and less discipline. And if Wilder, who's in the hospital now with COVID, we don't know how long, not Wilder, Fury, we don't know how long Fury's going to train.
So he is in the hospital?
Yeah. So we don't know how long he's going to train, right? So he may be, let's say now it's the middle of July, right, Vito? So what if he comes out in a month, right? Fights December, 24th? So he's got September, October. He's got 12 weeks, maybe 15 weeks to get in shape. Can he do it? Can he get in boxing shape? That means, can he get his stamina?
Yeah, that's the thing that watching his fights, his earlier fights, where if he's losing the first, 4 or 5 rounds, he somehow has that stamina to get you, the 10th, 11th, where the other boxer is just exhausted.
Right. And Fury's been knocked down before in several fights and gets up. It's not getting knocked down, it's getting up. My father's hero was Joe Louis, who may be the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. No one in any weight division could punch like Joe Louis. And my father insisted that Louis was the best ever. And when Larry Holmes got knocked down by Shavers and got up, my father looked at me and said, son, I was wrong. Larry Holmes is the greatest heavyweight champ of all time because he got up. Shavers knocked him down and Ronaldo Snipes knocked him down. And when Shavers knocked him down, he felt like he'd been shot. But Holmes got up and stopped him. And it's that no, you don't. No, you don't. This is my title. You're not taking it. Gets up, gets angry, and says, that's it. Now I'm going to take you out.
Yeah, and here's the thing that that's very that was very confusing for the longest time with Fury and Wilder. I think there was a clause where in a, you're like, if we're fighting each other and you want a rematch, you can, but you have to get back to me in 100 days, right?
Right.
So Wilder didn't do that, and but he went to court. So they had like a him and Anthony Joshua, Fury and Joshua were set up to fight, I guess, in Dubai or Qatar or some. And
Dubai. Yeah.
what happened was is Wilder's like, no, 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 because of with COVID and with the way the things have been going, I want that fight. I want that fight. So
And he went to court and he won.
yeah, he went to court and won. And Anthony Joshua, who was not happy, uh, said he called him not an elite fighter.
I agree with that.
So when he means not an elite fighter, he just means like he's not top 20 in the world, like not.
There's great fighters, and then there's elite level fighters who are at the very top of the sport. So in reality, it doesn't really matter who's got what belt or what a sanctioning body says, because you and I know who the best is, right? People can say all they want that England's a better soccer team, but sorry, Italy won. They're the best. That's the way it goes. They're an elite team. They won all the way through. An elite fighter is a guy who fights the best fighters in the division and beats them all. That's an elite level fighter. Wilder has never fought the best fighters in the division. He just hasn't. And he's fought second tier guys and he beat them. And because of that, he's not an elite level fighter. Joshua's fought elite level fighters and beaten them. And also, Joshua does not have an easy fight now coming up against Alexander Usyk. Usyk was the cruiserweight unified champion. He held every single belt. He's not physically as big. He's 6'3", and he's 210 now, I guess. But he's extremely skilled and very smart. And Joshua's 6'7". So we'll see what happens. We know Joshua can be knocked down because Andy Ruiz stopped him, and also Klitschko knocked him down when he beat Klitschko. So to be an elite fighter, there's very few fighters that can call themselves elite. Julio Cesar Chavez won championships in many divisions like Oscar De La Hoya did and beat the best. So if I want to win a championship in a weight division, and I go after the guy who's the third ranked or fourth ranked champion, that doesn't make me an elite fighter. But if I go against a guy who's 30-0 with 30 knockouts, who everyone knows is the best, and I beat him, then I'm an elite fighter.
Like, yeah. Do you think that the weight, like I've never seen guys like they're monsters now. You got
Yeah,
guys,
absolutely.
they're absolutely gigantic. Where it's like they're super heavyweights.
Yeah.
You got guys that like 250 pounds is just kind of average, I guess.
Well, not average.
That's a lot of weight, and the height of these guys. Was it a belief that back then a guy being that tall just was too lanky?
No, just guys who are that tall don't often have good balance. They just don't. Thomas Hearns never had good balance.
So with the
Angela,
with the training that they have now, and the doctors, and I mean, it's just a sign. Like, I remember watching this is years ago, watching Holyfield train, and he had this machine on his back,
right?
That when he would punch, it was like it was like this wire. It looked like
yeah.
It was like,
that's been around for a long time.
Yeah, but that's like 50 years ago, nobody saw like the techniques that the guys work out. Like, I watched
that particular machine Dempsey used.
Dempsey used that machine?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll take it further than that. I saw a video of Rocky Marciano working out. You know what he would do? He would pick up a rock, walk up a hill with it, drop it, and then run, it'd go down the hill, and he'd go run down the hill, pick up this big rock, go back up the hill. And to me, I'm just thinking that's just for balance. That's just helping him learn balance.
It's not just balance. If you're going up a hill, it's difficult to walk up a hill with a rock. That's to give you stamina for the later rounds. Rocky did things that people didn't know about. Rocky would get up in water up to his shoulders and throw punches to the point where he could throw them as quickly in water as he could out of water. Rocky would do 10 to 20,000 sit-ups, then 20,000 push-ups, and 20,000 crunches a day, every day. He'd run 20 miles a day, every day. He would train for 6 months, and he would train every day, all day. He didn't take any time off. So Rocky was probably the best conditioned athlete that I ever knew of.
Well, that's what I mean with the way the technology and the way the food that they have now. You have doctors checking you out every day. You have trainers.
Right.
I mean, it's like it is a science when you're there. They've always treated fighters like a thoroughbred, right? So the level of training has, I believe, has changed drastically. Like even Lennox Lewis was like, these guys are huge. I'm a big man. They're huge.
Yeah, a lot of them are. But then you get guys like Big Baby Miller, who was a fighter out of New York, who was 320, and he was like 6'6", 6'7", and was dropped by his promoter, and no one's dealing with him because he tested positive 3 times for steroids. A lot of these guys that are big, some of it's not real. Just because they're big doesn't mean they're good or they can win. There's a guy named Seth Mitchell that was promoted by HBO, and he was a former football player, and he was big, but he lost to a couple run-of-the-mill heavyweights, and that was it. So being big isn't necessarily a guarantee that you could win. People would look at a guy like Jimmy McLarnin from the 30s, who was 2-time welterweight champion from Canada, world welterweight champion, and skinny, thin white guy, but he could punch like a mule kick, and if he landed on you square, you were finished. So it's not the size of the dog in the fight; it's the size of the fight in the dog. And some guys like Gennady Golovkin and recently Lomachenko, who won his comeback fight, train like beasts, so they can't be beat in the ring. When Lomachenko lost to Teofimo Lopez, he was fighting with a ripped shoulder muscle, and he didn't want to not fight because a lot of money was at stake. He thought he could still beat him, but now Lopez is in the hospital with COVID, so he's got to do a mandatory. That's another thing that screws up big fights. Guy says, "I'm the unified champion. I have all 4 belts." Right. And now I can fight this guy for a lot of money. Well, each of the belts you hold, those sanctioning bodies say, you got to fight our guy. Yeah, but your guy's got 12 wins and 18 losses. Well, then we'll take your belt away. So the sanctioning bodies have replaced the mafia in terms of hurting boxing. But to get back to what you're saying, yeah, the guys are bigger doesn't mean necessarily that they're better.
Right.
And there was a recent thing when Canelo beat Billy Joe Sanders. A lot of fighters, one in particular, former champion Fernando Vargas, El Ferraz, ferocious Fernando, called Sanders a pussy because he quit after the 8th or 9th round. But he had a broken orbital bone that was knocked loose from his skull and broken in 8 places, so the bone was floating around. He would have lost his eye if the fight hadn't been stopped.
Right.
And the irony, of course, was a month or 2 months before, another British fighter named Daniel Dubois took a knee and took a 10 count against Joe Joyce because he had a broken orbital bone. And Billy Joe said, "I'd rather die. Only a pussy takes a knee." And then, of course, it happens to him, and he readily quits. Getting an orbital bone broken, that's,
Yeah.
It's like when Victor Ortiz fought Josecito Lopez and he quit because he was coughing out blood. He got a broken jaw. And I did a radio show on ESPN, and people were saying, well, he's a pussy, he's a sissy. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, this is what we'll do. You'll get in the ring against the same fighter. I'll break your jaw with a baseball bat, and we'll see how long you last.
Yeah.
How many punches you take.
I don't really watch the UFC, but just going through YouTube, they were showing the Conor McGregor fight.
Right, and he broke his tibia.
No, his ankle, like it snapped completely.
Yeah, right.
It was horrendous.
Yeah.
Like it looked like it looked like his leg was rubber.
Yeah.
The way it bent, like it bent.
Yeah, and same thing. People jumped at him for not continuing. And in boxing, people don't realize when you break your hand, which is quite common, no UFC athlete, no boxer, no wrestler ever goes into a match completely 100%. There's always little aches and pains. Boxers always have broken knuckles. You live with it. But when you break your hand or your wrist, it's not that you can't throw a punch, because you'll bite down and you'll throw it through the pain. You can't block a punch. It hurts too much. So it puts them at a disability. For a guy like Conor McGregor, combat sports, all sports, Vito, as you know, are two things: balance and leverage. And if he can't stand on, if he can only stand on one foot, he's finished. And I said this about a guy who fought, I can't remember who it was, who fought Joe Louis and broke his arm. And I thought, it's tough enough fighting Joe Louis with two good arms. With one arm, you're just letting him take your life.
Oh God, Lou, I saw a fight where he dislocated his shoulder, the fighter. And so it was just hanging.
And they put it back in.
No, he didn't, they couldn't, they didn't put it back in, but he actually came back and won. Like it was like he knocked him out with one. And that is like, that's an incredible thing to do.
Well, you look at a guy like Lou Ambers, who was the lightweight champ, and he came back to this corner once and said, my right hand's broken. He was a right-handed fighter. And the trainer said, should I stop it? And he said, nah, I'll beat this bum with my left. And he did.
It's like Evel Knievel showing up. What was it? It was that famous, he had to jump like, it was like the funniest thing in the world. He had to jump like 25 buses, and he showed up. And I guess the guy at ABC was like, hey, Evel, how you doing? And Evel Knievel goes, how many buses are out there? And he goes, there's 25. And he goes, I can't jump that. And he goes, oh, do you want us to get rid of like a couple of buses? He's like, nah, don't worry about it. It's crazy. Right.
I got to go in a couple of secs because my wife's downstairs and doesn't.
Okay. All right. So what is your prediction for the
I think Fury will stop Wilder when they fight, and he'll stop him within 8 rounds.
Okay. All right. So without further ado, hey, thanks.
My pleasure, buddy.
And I'll talk to you soon. And that really sucks about the fight that it's been postponed.
Yeah, I was very disappointed.
What are you gonna do, man? That's just the way it is. Yeah. All right. I'll let you go, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay, Lou?
Okay.
All right.
Be well, my friend.
You too. Ciao.